the dollars. So, you know, I'm listening to people, I'm watching people, I went to church in South Carolina. Maybe it was over 60. Long time back. He said they were losing.
That's the smartest thing I've said.
They don't have enough people. I said, I'm not gonna go in there, gather it up, bag it up, I said, and check it out, I said, and then haul it up. It's incredible.
Alright. Is this thing working? No? Sounds like it's working. Is this thing working? Okay. Hopefully it's working. Alright, well it is that time to go ahead and get started this evening. And sorry we're a couple minutes past, but getting everything situated and going. Tonight we are now getting into the book of 1 Samuel. Does anybody still need a workbook on 1 and 2 Samuel? If you don't have one, raise your hand and we'll get you one. Everybody have one? Got one, all right. So it should be good there. There's plenty of them there in the foyer. We've got plenty to go around. Also, I believe there's still a copy of the Sunday book in there as well. One. So if you still need a book on Colossians that we're in right now, make sure to grab one of those in the foyer. Also, for the men's study, if you have not yet gotten the men's study book, let me know. We've got those. I can give you one of the men's study books as we're going to be getting into Romans. That'll be this coming up Monday, actually. Did any of the guys still need a book for the men's study on Romans? Anybody not have one? All right. Well, we've got those available. Again, that starts this coming Monday, the introduction and lesson 1 and all that. And that'll be the plan here at the church building on Monday. But tonight we are getting into the next book of the Bible, at least in somewhat chronological order. We know we were in the book of Judges, went through that. We just finished up with the book of Ruth, who that book came from, was written about during some of the days of the Judges. But tonight we're coming to see what happens next, and still going in chronological order. And then we have 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which technically, in their own way, cover the same time. I'm going to try to figure out if there's a way to go through those in chronological order, but we'll see what's available. That's still a ways away. That's what we'll be looking into as we go on from there. So tonight we are going to cover the introduction to 1 Samuel and get into 1 Samuel tonight here in lesson 1. Getting into all of that, but before we get into the lesson, I'm going to ask Jack if he would to lead us in prayer. We've got some handy microphones, so he's going to use the microphone back there. But let's go to God in prayer, and then we'll get into our lesson.
Our Heavenly Father, we're so very thankful that we can be here this evening to study and learn and grow. You're such a wonderful God. There's no one else like you. You just speak things into existence. You show us great love. Whereas the other gods that men make with their hands end up being the type that are always mad because they don't exist. And people are always yelling at them and trying to get their attention. We're just so thankful that we can enter into your throne room this evening and address you. Our Father, help us as we see all the many current events going on around us to not get discouraged, to pray for our rulers and those people in authority, and then just turn it over to you. Help us to realize how really wonderful and great that you are, and that one day, in all your fairness, you will settle all these issues that we keep hearing about, but you'll settle them in the biblical way. Pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Jack. I'm gonna try to work on, how did that microphone work? Is that okay? Kind of iffy, not clear-ish, maybe? We'll adjust it. We'll have to working on some of the sound system and trying to get things figured out. So we'll keep working on that and all of that. But thank you, Jack, for the prayer. And the book of 1 Samuel. As you see on page in the workbook, they've got a little bit of an introduction. Really, there's not much to tell as far as an introduction to the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. But he has offered us some information there on page 5 in his introduction. We're just going to kind of touch on that real quick. Why does it have the name Samuel? Is it because he wrote it? No. Probably not. No, I mean, I guess technically he might could have written some of the early stuff, but probably not, as a lot of it is going to be written after his death. And then there's also a reference to, actually, he does talk about this. Where to go? Somewhere in here he talks about when, this is question 4, if you already did this ahead of time. When was the book probably written, due to a bit of evidence that is found in the text itself? What's that? All right, which is the period of what? Well, the divided kingdom is after the, so it's kind of, that's coming down the road, but we're not quite there yet. But it tells us that there's a bit of evidence in the text itself that tells us that the book was probably written during the early period of the divided kingdom. He talks about that in the middle column. And so that's coming up because we got to go through Saul, David, Solomon, and it ain't till after Solomon that you get to the divided kingdom. And that seems to be probably when this was written. He does talk some about in the Hebrew collection of all of this. If I understand all of this correctly, there's actually one big book, or one kind of, used to be, if I understood what he was saying down here, in the Vulgate, used to be 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kings is what I think used to be. And then came along, he talks about there that it was, when it was originally written, the 2 books of 1st and 2nd Samuel were actually one, but then they were divided by who? Or when were they divided? Yeah. By the Septuagint translators, approximately 270 BC, which what is the Septuagint? Okay, yeah, the Greek version. So when they decided to translate it into Greek, they decided to make some changes, and they divided that book in, called it 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then 1st and 2nd Kings, and we then have the order of it all. Which, as he says, kind of unfortunate, which I don't think it really, it's not too unfortunate, because thankfully we have all of the books. So even though 2nd Samuel, or 1st and 2nd Samuel, are divided, or I'm thinking of, yes I am, 1st and 2nd Samuel are divided. He talks about that in the book, that 1st Samuel ends with, well, we haven't got there yet, but just to make the point, 1st Samuel ends with the death of Saul and his sons, but then 2nd Samuel opens up with kind of right in the middle of all of that, of after that happens, But thankfully, we've got them back to back, so you just keep reading and, it's totally fine. But anyways, that's what they've done. So we have 1st and 2nd Samuel, then 1st and 2nd Kings, and then 1st and 2nd Chronicles. But he talks about, we don't know who wrote it. We know about when to the best of our ability. Talks about, he divides it up there. So we're going to be told about Samuel, Saul, David, and then in 2 Samuel, more about David as king. And that'll be coming up. And then he talks about all of that. It covers about how many years? 1 Samuel. Well, 1 and 2 Samuel, I guess. Covers about 125 years is what we're going to be getting into. And there are some that it talks about, depending on the translations and manuscripts, there are maybe some differences in some of them that are argued. But anyways, we'll just go through this as best we can. So now let's get into lesson 1 and the text itself in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And, we just got done with Ruth. We were told about the lineage of where we got David, which David will be coming up. But in 1 Samuel chapter 1, who are we actually introduced to? Alright, Elkanah, or however you want to pronounce his name. A man by the name of Elkanah, who was from what tribe? Which is, I think I'd be careful with this one, because the author, I think, makes a good observation. Well, yeah, he wasn't from, see, now I'm getting these confused. It says that territorially, he was an Ephraimite. But technically, he was from the tribe of Levi. Did Levi have a connection to the Ephraimites?
Well, they had a city in each tribe.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think what the author does is talks about how Samuel, this family, they must have been really from the tribe of Levi, and we are able to determine that because, why? What's that? Well, yeah, because Samuel ends up, he's working in the temple, becomes priest, and doesn't he become a priest? And I guess we'll find out more on time to jog my memory. But the Levites had places all over. Remember, they didn't get an inheritance for themselves. At any rate, we're told, did somebody say something? Oh. At any rate, we're told that he was from this Ramatham Zophim of the mountains of Ephraim. His name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, or as some had Eliel, and goes on from there, an Ephraimite. And we're told about his wives, plural. Why? How many do you have? 2. And what were their names? Alright, so Hannah was the name of one, and the other Peninnah, however you pronounce that. What are we told about these 2 women in verse 2?
One had children, the other was barren.
Who? Hannah was barren, but Peninnah was able to have children. And so, if we're familiar with the story, really any stories previously, we know that's there's a lot of issues around all of that in and of itself, and then you've got these 2 women who are married to the same man, which then complicates everything, makes it worse. So we're introduced to them and then their situation. Verse 3, we're told what? What was Elkanah good about?
Worship.
Yeah, worshiping God. Because it says, verse 3, this man went up from his city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Also, the 2 sons of Eli were told about, Hophni and Phinehas. The priests of the Lord were there. But yearly, Elkanah was good about going and worshiping the Lord, offering sacrifices. I just talk about question number 3 that I guess I kind of missed, which we're about to see. What problems come up when you have a polygamous marriage? Yeah, well, what problems don't you have? I mean, go on. So there's definitely going to be rivalry, going to be jealousy, going to be conflict. We've already seen that in previous biblical history when there's marriages, when you have more than one wife, and the troubles and conflicts, and especially when maybe as this situation, and we've seen this before, where one wife is having children, the other wife is not able to have children, and then all the complications that that brings along with it. Which then we read about this, that we're kind of told, verse 3, he's good about going and worshiping God yearly, and whenever the time came, verse 4, for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all of her sons and daughters. But what did he do for Hannah? Yeah, why did he give her a double portion? Yeah, because he loved her. Maybe even, I mean, I know it doesn't say that word for word that he loved her more, but maybe he felt more for her, knowing her situation. But even though Peninnah got a portion, and then all her sons and daughters, you know, technically maybe Hannah, you know, was to get her own kind of personal portion, which, you know, would be smaller than what Peninnah's group was getting. But he made sure to actually give her double because he loved her, although the Lord had closed her womb. And I don't know necessarily as well that that means he didn't love Peninnah. I just think he really loved Hannah, even though, you know, she couldn't have children, even though, you know, she probably did feel worthless, as we're about to talk about, because what happened in verses 6 and 7, which is really a question. Yeah. Well, we see some of these issues that we're told in verse 6. What is Peninnah referred to as? At least in the New King James, she's referred to as a rival. Any other translations use a different word? No? It says her rival, that is, Hannah's rival, also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb. So it was year by year when she went up to the house of the Lord that Peninnah provoked Hannah. Therefore Hannah wept and did not eat. So this does sound like, does it sound intentional? Oh yeah. So sadly, this seems to be the case, that Peninnah, she kind of made it a competition, and she really made sure Hannah felt the fact that, you know, Peninnah had children and Hannah didn't. Ha ha. You know, look at me, look at us. Oh, poor Hannah, boo-hoo. However she did it, we're not directly told maybe what she said or how she acted, but we're told she provoked Hannah severely, making Hannah miserable, making her distraught and depressed and weeping, not even eating of the meals as they went to worship together. And then, which really that's number 5. And because it says back then, especially, what was the attitude toward barrenness and even having children? Yeah, I mean, having children was a big deal. So to not have children was, I mean, they really took that hard, which at the same time, I'm thinking that's kind of the same today, really. That when women today are not able to have children, a lot of times it affects them very strongly. And so we understand where Hannah's coming from, but especially in the culture, in the time, they really, having children was a very big deal, very important, especially male children, producing heirs and descendants, and all of that, but Hannah was not able. Now, Elkanah does try to comfort her in verse 8. And how does he do that?
In an improper way.
What?
In an improper way, because he didn't know what her problem really was and how she felt.
Well, sure.
Therefore, he said, why
Yeah, I don't know. I've kind of felt that way. That maybe it's kind of male's attempt, the husband's attempt to comfort wife. But at the same time, reading it again, I kind of wonder, maybe this was the best he had. Maybe he was being sincere in his, talking to her, and he does tell her, he says, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than the 10 sons? Now, he knew what her problem was. He knew she was not able to have children. But he was at the same time trying to show her, I think, how much, he loved her, he cared for her. But still, at the same time, that's not necessarily probably what she wanted to hear. But I think he probably, I can't speak for him, I don't know where it's coming from exactly. But I think his intent was probably good. He's husband to her, he's trying to comfort her, but nothing seems to be working no matter, what he does for her. But still trying to comfort her, trying to help her. But still, was that magically going to make it go away? No. So he would still have to continue being patient and understanding and continue to try to help her and comfort her and strengthen her as best he could. But that was a little bit of what we're told in that situation anyway. And then this actually continues on because the setting has been, they've come to worship, they're eating, but Hannah's not eating, at least as far as we know. And then, what does Hannah do? In verse 9. What's that?
She prays to the Lord.
Well, yeah, I guess verse 9 doesn't really tell us, but it tells us in verse 10. But it does say, verse 9, that she got up. That after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, it says that she arose, and then we're going to see what she does in verse 10. We're told that who was priest?
Eli.
All right, Eli was the high priest, and he was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle, or the temple, some versions use, of the Lord. Just like palace, temple, tabernacle, not literally the temple that would be built later by Solomon, but it's really just a word describing the place of the Lord, the tabernacle of the Lord. And how are we told that Hannah was feeling? No, bad. Very distressed, very bitter in her soul. And what was she doing?
Right.
Yeah, she was praying to the Lord and weeping in anguish. This really affected her deeply. Affected her a lot. And Peninnah, I'm sure, wasn't helping. Peninnah was just making it even worse. It was bad enough that Hannah was having to, deal with her barrenness and already feeling the, struggle with that. But then you've got, this other woman who's just rubbing it in her face, making it worse. She is distraught. She is distressed. She is depressed. She is upset. She is just in bitterness of soul, weeping in anguish, calling out to the Lord. And then we're actually told, what does she do specifically in verse 11? All right, so she makes a vow or a promise to the Lord. And what does she promise? What does she vow? Oh, man. I thought it was on here. Now, question 9. What promise did she make? Okay. Yeah, she specifically asked for what? Mm-hmm. Why a male child?
To give him to.
What's that?
To give him to the Lord.
Well, yeah. And again, back then, the male children were the kind of the focus. No offense to the girls, but they really put a lot of emphasis on the males for inheritance, for household. But also to be given in service to the Lord is ultimately what she ends up promising. She says, O Lord of hosts, if you indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, And remember me and not forget your maidservant. So she keeps calling herself a servant of the Lord. But if you will give me, your maidservant, a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. And she says, no razor shall come upon his head. And so she's praying to God. She's pleading for a child, not just any child, but a male child. And if the Lord grants her a male child, she will in turn then give the child back to God and service to God all the days of that child's life. And this no razor shall come upon his head, which maybe points to the Nazirite vow that we've talked about before, that even Samson was under. Although we're not told a lot of other details, if it was a Nazirite vow, then she'd have to stay away from the, grapes and wine and all of that stuff, and then he would have to continue in that, but we're not really told as of yet a lot about that. But this is what she prays, this is what she vows to the Lord. And so she's praying, calling out to God for his blessings. Bless me with this child, and I will give him back to you. And so, verse 12, as she continued praying before the Lord, who noticed her praying? Eli. He saw her. I don't know how far they were from each other, but he saw her. Kind of wonder, he must have been within earshot, because he looked at her and he just watched her mouth, but he wasn't hearing anything. So he didn't hear her actually speaking or saying anything. So what did he go ahead and assume? Yeah, he thought she was drunk. You look at that. There's this woman, done come out of the tabernacle, and she's out here acting like this. She must be drunk. She's been having too much wine and strong drink or something, and she's had way too much. And so, verse 14 is when he's going to, verse 13 tells us at the end that he thought she was drunk. But what are we actually told? We already know what she's doing, but how is it even further told in verse 13 of what she was doing? Yeah. It says she spoke in her heart, only her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. And so Eli thought she was drunk, and what did he do? Verse 14. What does Eli do? Well, he goes and gets onto her. Right? He rebukes her, says, woman, what is your deal? How can you be here drunk like this? How long will you be drunk and be a drunkard, basically? Put your wine away from you. Talk about putting your foot in your mouth and not knowing what you're talking about. Was Hannah drunk? No. And she does, though, answer him and say, no, my Lord. And that calling him Lord was just the term for like a master, someone above you, honor and respect, with a little L, not a big L. But she says, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, verse 16, which literally a daughter of Belial. That's important. Keep that in mind, because that's going to come up in a little bit. That's actually already come up, if you remember. Was it in our study of Ruth or in the Judges? This being children or sons of Belial has been used before. And again, to be called a son or daughter of Belial was to be called a son or daughter of evil, of wickedness. In connection, then, really to be a child of Satan. But the real focus idea is that of evil, of wickedness. She says, do not think me a wicked woman, a daughter of wickedness. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. And I wonder how Eli felt after that. Probably not too good. He probably was having to get his foot out of his mouth. But he actually then does what in verse 17? Yeah. I'm like, whoops, sorry, you know. I hope he apologized. I don't know if he did. He should have, if he did. But he says to her, "We'll go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked of him." And then she said, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." And how was she when she left? She was feeling a lot better. She's poured her heart out to God, for one, which also, that's question 8. What can we learn about prayer from Hannah's example? Heartfelt. What's that?
It doesn't have to be out loud either.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be out loud. You pour your heart out. That's what she did. You know, she was going through this. She was having this problem, these challenges, these emotions, and she poured her heart out to God. And that's what we're to do, to take it to God and leave it in God's hands. And she poured her heart out to God. Eli then says, you know, a blessing, you know, go your way. You know, may God do this for you, which is still going to be up to God, even though, you know, Eli said that. But then she's pretty confident. Says, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." And she's feeling pretty confident and good about that. And so it says she went her way and actually did what? She ate. And her face was no longer sad. So she was feeling pretty good and pretty confident about, you know, her prayer to God. Also Eli's blessing and her asking favor from Eli, and then extension from the Lord. Oh yeah, all right. So Hannah's prayer, her praying to the Lord, she pours her heart out to God. And then what happens next? Verse 19. Well, they got up, right? Says verse 19, "They rose early in the morning, worshipped before the Lord, returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her." And so in the process of time, what happened? Verse 20. She got pregnant, which up to this point was not happening. We're told, you know, her womb was closed. It was, you could say, it was physically impossible for her to have children. But now the Lord comes. He has heard her prayer. He remembers her vow, remembers what she asked for. And it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son. And what'd she name him? Samuel. Why did she name him Samuel? Yeah. So Samuel, the idea literally means heard by God, is the idea of the name Samuel. She says, "Because I have asked for him from the Lord," and really the idea is God heard. That's another thing. That names really meant something back then, for good or for bad. They named their children based on certain things. And so Samuel's name was given because she asked of God and God heard her. And so she was able, that's question 10. What miracle occurred? Got pregnant, she had a child. That was not happening without God's doing, without God's intervention. Hannah was going to have no children whatsoever. But with God, all things are possible. He granted her prayer, granted her petition. She has a son, names him Samuel. And then it kind of goes on from there, that life goes on. Elkanah and all his house, they go up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah would not go up these particular years, not until when? Yeah, not until verse 22, not until the child was weaned, and then I will take him that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. And so Elkanah says, okay, do as seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only let the Lord establish his word, or some versions say your word, kind of like, and really, both. May God, keep his promise. He's kind of already kept his promise. So I think it might be even more fitting that it be her word, because she still got to commit and fulfill her end of the bargain and giving him to the Lord. But she says she's going to do after she weans him. So she stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned him. And when she had weaned him, then what does she do? She takes him, right? So now when she weaned him, verse 24, she takes him up with her to the tabernacle, to the Lord. Some versions are a little different on this part. The New King James and some of them say that she went up with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. But some versions, instead of 3 bulls, it says that she took a 3-year-old bull. So you kind of got to figure out, which is which. But either way, whether she took the one, whether she took multiple, she's obviously taking them as an offering for a sacrifice. The flour, the wine, brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. We're not exactly told how young. Obviously within the age of being weaned, although as the author points out, in that culture and time, they weaned children a lot older than we normally do in our culture and time. But anyways, and then verse 25, they slaughter the bull, they bring the child to Eli, and she says, "Oh, my Lord, little L, as your soul lives, I am the woman who stood by you here, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I asked of him. Therefore, I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." And so they worshiped the Lord there. So she presented him after he was old enough to be weaned. And how does she just describe her giving Samuel to the Lord? That she lent him to the Lord, or granted him. Any versions use any different word? That's going to be in verse 28. Dedicated. So it kind of depends on, which translation you're using. But basically the idea is she's there to give the child back to God, even though, the child is technically hers. She knows where the child came from. It was granted by the Lord. She is giving him back to the Lord as she promised, as she vowed. And so he is going to be dedicated to spend his life serving the Lord in the tabernacle, and forever and ever, amen, for the rest of his life. And so a great event, a great story. Again, this could be on the Hallmark Channel, make a good movie, But here Hannah has been blessed by the Lord, given a child. Thankfully, Hannah fulfilled her vow. Hannah could have said, I've thought about that for a few years or so now, and I think I'm just gonna keep them at home with me. How do you think that would have gone over? Probably not so good. If you make a vow to God and then you don't keep it, no good things come from that. But thankfully, Hannah's example, she was blessed by the Lord with this child. She promised to give the child back in service to God, and that's exactly what she does here in this part of chapter 1, or in chapter 1. All right, questions or thoughts on any of that so far? Okay, so pretty straightforward. We're introduced to these characters, introduced to Hannah, now introduced to Samuel as a little boy, now being given to the Lord. She actually goes on, though, we're not done. Hannah then prays again, and this time, though, what is her prayer? Instead of petitioning God, she's now what? Well, she's praising God. right? She's praising God, thanking God, glorifying God. She says, my heart rejoices in the Lord, my strength, or my horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies. So I wonder if she was thinking of Peninnah. What do you think? I smile at, well, I mean, she doesn't even have a bad attitude. So probably maybe not, I don't know. But my heart rejoices in the Lord. My strength is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, which, again, that could be said of Peninnah. She was probably pretty arrogant towards Hannah this whole time and having children. But just anyone who talks very proudly or arrogantly. For the Lord is the God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who are full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor, he makes rich. He brings low, he lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes and make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's. He has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked will be silent in darkness. For by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed, or the strength of his anointed. This is her prayer of praise. Sum that up. What's the gist of her prayer?
Praise God.
Well, yeah, praise God.
That he's able to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Who's in control? Who is creator? Who can do all things? Who can bring people down? Who can bring them up? Who can do all these things? I mean, that's her prayer. And she now knows this even more so, because God has taken her, who was barren, and now has blessed her with children, which we're actually going to find out later. She goes on to have even more children, which is pretty cool. But she praises God, that God is the one who brings down, God is the one who raises up, who gives life, who kills, who brings the proud down, the rich down, lifts the poor, lifts the hungry, lifts the beggar, lifts the needy. The pillars of the earth, God has established, and the enemies and adversaries of the Lord will be destroyed. She even says something interesting. She talks about the Lord's king. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn, or the strength of his anointed. That's kind of interesting, because what has not happened yet?
No king.
They ain't got a king.
So almost prophetic.
Yeah, it does almost sound prophetic. I mean, unless she was just, throwing it out there just to emphasize, whatever. Or it could be prophetic. Maybe it was a prophetic statement of what's about to happen. They're about to have a king in the sort of kind of near future. But then ultimately, we know even way further than that. We'll talk about the Messiah, the anointed one. But probably more so talking about having a king. So that is her prayer of praise. And in verse 11, we're told that Elkanah then went to his house at Ramah, but the child ministered and served the Lord before Eli the priest. And so remembering, they brought, Hannah now has brought Samuel to the tabernacle, to Eli. She's now dedicated him, given him. He is now going to be in service to the Lord before Eli the priest. And so that is now his new home, which is kind of interesting too. One would kind of be interested to know the age. He's a young boy. mean, maybe even somewhere 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6, depending on how far you go. But even at that age, I mean, that's a young age. Then your mom say, hey, we're going to the tabernacle, and hey, me and Dad are going home. You're staying here for the rest of your life. See you next year. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. But that's what happened. Samuel is now going to stay here. This is now his new home and his service to God, helping Eli the priest and the other priests. But Hannah is thankful, and Hannah praises the Lord. All right, well, we're going to have to stop there for tonight. But are there any other thoughts or questions from what we have talked about tonight? Okay? All right, well, next week, let's come and we'll pick up here in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 12, where we will begin to talk about the sons of Eli. And if you've not read up on that yet, please do so. Go ahead and come ready with that. And then I will go ahead and say, let's take a peek here at lesson 2. Go ahead and come ready, just in case, with lesson 2. If we have time to finish out lesson 1, we will, and then we'll continue right into lesson 2. But come ready with all of that. And you still need a workbook. Make sure to get one there in the foyer. There's still plenty of them there. Also, the Sunday books or the men's study books. So just make sure you have those. All right. Thank you.
Good evening. We'll sing song number 361 before the invitation this evening. 361 in his time. In his time, in his time, he makes all things beautiful. In his time, Lord, please show me every day as you're teaching me your way, that you do just what you say in your time, in your time, in your time. Lord, my life to you I bring. May each song I have to sing be to you a lovely thing in your time. The invitation song will be song number 276.
Well, tonight I want to talk about what we just talked about in Bible class, and some of y'all were not in our Bible class this evening. Y'all were dealing with the kiddos, and we're thankful for that. Good classes, but in our class tonight we were talking about 1 Samuel and talking about Hannah there in chapter 1. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what happened with Hannah as Hannah was praying there in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And she comes out of the tabernacle, as we saw there, and then she's praying to God, and as she says, she's pouring her heart out to God. But she's not audibly speaking any words, but she's still moving her mouth. She's speaking to herself, or really to God. But it's within her own heart, her own head. You couldn't hear her speak. And then we see Eli, who's sitting there at the door of the tabernacle, and he sees her over there, and he sees her lips moving, her mouth moving, but he's not hearing anything. And then he just, for whatever reason, and I don't really know why, it's like he's obviously never seen somebody pray before, I guess, but he assumes that she's drunk. And so he sees Hannah over there, and he just thinks, man, she's acting really crazy. She must just be drunk and out of her head because of how she looks and look at how she's acting. And then he even goes up to her and he rebukes her. He gets onto her and says, how long are you going to stay a drunkard? Stop drinking. Turn away from the wine. Give it up. And so he has now done multiple things. He has assumed something about Hannah. He's made a condemning judgment about Hannah. He even goes to rebuke Hannah and gets onto her for what he thinks is drunkenness. And then, come to find out, she tells him, well, I'm not drunk, as you say. I am not a child of wickedness, as you don't claim me to be a child of wickedness. I'm not drunk. I've not, had the wine, intoxicating drink. I'm praying. I'm pouring my heart out to God. And I kind of wish we could see Eli's reaction to that. Like, if it was me, and I hope that's never me, but if it were me, I'd probably be kind of shocked and my jaw on the ground and trying to get my big old foot out of my mouth and really feel pretty bad that I just made this accusation to this poor lady who's pouring her heart out to God. I've made assumptions about her. I've condemned her. I've now rebuked her for something she hasn't done. I'd be feeling pretty low once I found out that that's not really what was going on. But Eli, we're not told necessarily his reaction. Did he apologize? Did he say he's sorry? No, we're not told. But he at least, corrects himself and blesses her. May the Lord's favor be upon her. But I think what happens there with Eli doing that is a good reminder today that we got to be careful of the same thing. And that is making assumptions about people. Making judgments about people by certain factors we may see them in or doing. Now, granted, yes, we are to make judgments based on, if we see somebody, is doing something they shouldn't be doing, well then, we need to, try to help them, as best we can. But sometimes if we're not careful, we can see people in their lives or somewhere. I mean, it could happen anywhere, anytime, and then maybe to ourselves, we make these judgments. We make these assumptions about people, just like Eli did. All Eli knew was what he saw at the moment. And he just automatically assumed, oh, she's drunk. This woman's a drunkard. And he didn't have all the facts. He didn't know for sure whether or not she was drunk. But he assumed. And then he had the audacity, based on his assumption, he didn't go to her and, you would think, like, say, ask her, like, are you okay? Like, is everything okay? And then if she starts talking out of her head and slurring her words and she's about to fall over, well, that's probably a pretty good sign. She's either drunk or having a medical issue. He could have gone over and checked on her and just asked her, hey, are you okay? I noticed you over here and I just didn't know if everything was all right. Can I help you? He just goes, well, stop being a drunkard. Give up the wine. And he just lays into her based on his assumption. Is that possible for us to do today? Is it possible for us to make assumptions about people? Number one, to make assumptions about people in our own head and our own hearts, whether we say anything or not. Sometimes we can make assumptions about people, even if we never speak it out loud. Or is it possible for us to make assumptions about people and then go to, get onto them or correct them, and we haven't even tried to ask them, like, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? And so if we're not careful, based on our assumptions, we can act out against people and then may find ourselves in a similar situation to what Eli found himself in. Or maybe yet even just as bad, worse, or something. What if, and Eli maybe could have done this, or we could do this today, what if we see something, someone, and we make an assumption, and we never actually go to that person and talk to them, but instead we go talking to everybody else about it? What if Eli, made his assumption and then never went and talked to, got on to Hannah, but then he went to all these other people and said, you know who I saw today? You know who I saw yesterday? That this Hannah woman, and she was just as drunk out of her mind as she could be. And Eli could have gossiped about her and spread these lies and rumors about her. And that's something we can also do today. We can also make assumptions about people, but then go spread those assumptions to other people, which is not okay either. And so I think this situation in 1 Samuel chapter 1 with Hannah and Eli, and really Eli is the one with the problem, I think it's an important reminder to all of us that we need to be oh so very careful that we don't make assumptions, that we don't condemn people, that we don't gossip about people, and that we don't treat people wrongly or get on to them for things that we may not know all the details about. Because that can happen. I'm also reminded of, remember Job's 3 friends? That's another example of some folks who made some assumptions. And how well did that work out for them? Not so good. So we need to be careful in all of our relationships and all of our dealings with people to not make assumptions. And if we think there might be something going on or something might be the matter, well, then we need to ask. If we care about whoever it is, we can go and ask, hey, I noticed this, I saw this, I heard that. I just want to make sure, is everything okay? What's going on? How can I help? And then find out, okay, what's really going on. Because I know there's been times that I have made assumptions about people. and then later come to find out more information and realize, well, my perception was off. I didn't really see the whole story. And so I've got to be careful with that too. And I just wanted to remind us, since that was on our minds tonight in reading that, I wanted to just talk some more about that. And just, we've got to be careful, guard ourselves from making the same mistake Eli did. And hopefully we'll keep ourselves from doing wrong, but also keep ourselves from doing wrong against others and hurting others in some way. And so we need to be careful with that. Tonight, maybe this is something that's touched your heart. Maybe you realize there's some things along these lines that you need to work on or correct, change, maybe change your approach. Or maybe it's something totally different. Maybe it's something we haven't talked about tonight, but there's something on your mind, on your heart, that you need prayers and help and encouragement. Won't you come now as we stand and as we sing this song?
Would you be free from your burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you or evil a victory win? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be free from your passion and pride? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. From Portland to Calvary's side, there's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you do service for Jesus your King? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you lift daily his praises to sing? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's good to see everybody that could be here. We certainly miss those who can't be with us, and we've got quite a handful to mention tonight. But it is good to see so many that could be here, and good to have our visitors as well. And hope to see everybody Sunday morning at 9:30 for Bible class and 10:30 for worship, and 6 p.m. for worship on Sunday as well. But this time we're going to go ahead and shut down the live feed, and then we'll